go to 80 events. We don't have to vote on anything.
That's true.
Discussions.
You can hold the meetings.
I know
Yeah.
Sean Sawyer told me he couldn't attend
Oh,
because
okay.
he's talking to a donor this morning.
Okay.
And I think I saw where Michael Johnston is, he couldn't attend.
And so that's,
And so
then
we're
there's
missing
Mike
Mike,
Owens.
I don't know what.
His grandmother died.
Oh, okay, all right.
And the funeral's tomorrow.
Oh, that's
The
terrible.
wake was last night.
Oh,
Okay.
my. Oh, my goodness.
Sean may join us via Zoom.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Well, let's call to order. Can we do it without Mike here?
Sure.
Mike just left the room.
You're the chair, you're the chair.
I know, but I don't want to go on without him. Let's call to order to start. This committee's ready. I'm waiting for Mike. Actually, we technically should be approving the minutes, but.
Oh,
we don't-
sorry,
we
thank
don't
you.
have a.
Oh,
We don't, we can't approve minutes.
Can't do it, and I'm not a voting member anyway.
And I actually read the minutes.
And then you also had the February, so the minutes were from December, the notes are February, because you also didn't have a forum in February.
Can we
Must be
do that by something
email.
we said?
So we can approve
Maybe it's
minutes
just
like.
time frame, because I think that was a holiday week.
So I suggest we,
Technically, because we're a public authority, we can't have virtual meetings under the governor's current law. I think that, there's been some discussion, as you know, at the board level, is this a working group or is this a formal committee? I think it's just useful to have whoever is available so that we can begin to further decide what roles we should have in the workforce in the future.
so we can put on.
Let's go. Yeah.
approving. Mike, love to hear about we don't look to hear about the update.
Well, I think, the purpose was to have a discussion about the issues surrounding childcare. I know that Chris and Amanda have been working on this for a while. We've been working on it. It's kind of at a point now where there's no facilities. People who have facilities have been in asking us for more money. Where could they get more money? Because for even at the prices they can afford to charge, they can't operate the facility, and there's a financial cap. And it was heart wrenching to hear the woman who came in from the largest. Is that one of the largest?
Largest what?
The lady at the bottom, right under at the bottom. She's a board member.
Emma?
That's the facility. Carl Florio was this longtime board leader there, and they had an issue where their director had to be replaced because they got some publicity. But I think it's a solid operation. And when we talked with Jennifer Depew and Commissioner Gibson, he had put together a kind of a group that we were meeting fairly regularly a year or so ago. And Jennifer Depew was telling us that there's money available at the county level for pay for every person that would qualify in Columbia County that needed some financial support financially for daycare.
But there isn't necessarily the daycare.
There's no facility.
Right.
And we had, Martha and I had someone come in up in New Lebanon who, do I stay home? I think I talked about this in the board meeting. Do I stay home with my 2 kids and stop paying what I'm paying out of pocket for them to have daycare and take 3 or 4 more kids in and run a daycare myself? And we had one of our technical assistant providers do a business plan, and it wasn't going to work. So, she thought that her net take-home pay, after paying for daycare for her own children from the job that she had, that she could make more. And part of it is now you have to go out. The purpose coming here was we were looking at giving her a $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 grant. make whatever physical modifications were necessary to her home, buy whatever equipment is required by, and how to, and I guess how to get certified. So I think what's happening is there's tremendous under the table daycare where, you know, somebody down the street takes in 2 or 3 kids and they may be related, they may not. And, you know, the problem is when that person gets too old to do it or is, you know, and I don't think there's really a risk. There's less of a risk there. I mean, there is a risk by not being licensed and not being in the system, but you know, usually it's somebody that the parent has trust and confidence in. The person doing it doesn't report the money.
But I think that, I'm not sure, but I believe that in that scenario, they're not eligible, the family's not eligible for the money that's available to help pay for the childcare.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the certification to then.
Because I know they're.
There's a limit on how many,
private.
how many children we can have.
Then we had Matt Macker, Jim's son. He came to us about converting I think it was Chatham. There was a church for in Kinderhook. And I know at the DRI meeting, it's not DRI, it's New York Forward, where Kinderhook is getting money. They were considering redrawing the map to include church on the corner that has a daycare because they're going to get shut down if they don't do some improvements to the plumbing or to the physical access. And then it got into a big discussion as to could they do that because it was a church. But what I suggested was give the money to the daycare and have them as the tenant be responsible for the improvement. But like all of these issues, whether it's daycare or affordable housing, you know, there's a headline at Adirondack Enterprise, affordable housing, mission impossible. And it is, if you look at it, so broad. But if we can find 2 or 3 prototype models, you know, okay, the person in the home, what do they have to do to get certified? How do we, and I know the Community Foundation of the Capital Region, I don't know if it was how effective it was, but it was, they put on a seminar program, how to become a licensed daycare provider. I think it also scares people off who aren't business related when they realize, well, now I have to report on taxes, now I have to have bi-weekly paychecks and, you know, do all of that stuff. But I think there's a training component here.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's our turn to talk.
Yeah, no,
but
but that's all that's all. Yeah, I just shared everything we know about it.
So we kind of recognized those same problems, that there's this kind of vast under the table network, especially in the rural parts of the county. And then there are these few centers in kind of the either the business centers, the population centers, but the people in the more rural parts of the county can't either. There's no spots for them there, or they don't have the transportation to get there, or they can't afford to do that. So in an effort to kind of solve some part of that problem, Amanda and I started working with Families of Woodstock to do almost exactly what you had talked about, to identify people who are either currently providing the childcare illegally in their home and and register them so that the families could be eligible for the subsidy, or identify people who are interested in starting small in-home daycare centers, right, as a business. And then the workforce office would cover the cost of training and some part of the physical plant modifications. The college would manage the training, and Families of Woodstock would lend kind of the logistical and expertise support. So we built that model out and have had 2 successful cohorts now go through, and have had a total of 5 people who have completed the program, and each of them can have up to 8 kids younger than school age. And I actually won an award from the Early Care and Learning Council this year for it. So the issues that we found, so the model was designed purposefully to be a rural childcare network rather than trying to plop centers in areas where working families could get their kids to build these small kind of network of providers throughout the more rural parts of the county. So that, you know, there are some childcare options in New Lebanon. There's some childcare options in Germantown. There's some, at least somewhere in the county, there'll be someone that is a registered daycare center, so that the working families again can have access to the huge amount of subsidy that's out there. There's tons of money to help people pay for childcare. But if you're sending your kids to, I'm going to use the term illegal, unregistered childcare provider that's not exempt, you're not eligible for those subsidies. So the problem that we ran into is first identifying people who are currently providing, and again, illegal is probably not the right word, but it's the one I'm going to use.
Casual,
unregistered, right? Unregistered daycare providers. Informal, right? So identifying those people, because there is some liability, right? Whether it's real or perceived, there's potentially some liability for someone who's providing that service outside of the registered childcare system. So that was kind of step one, was figuring out how do we get to those people and say, hey, at no cost to you, we'll help Families of Woodstock and the college. We'll put you through all of the training, CPR and child first aid and all of the things that you need. We'll help support you in making sure you have all your smoke detectors and fire extinguishers and everything that you need to be a registered childcare provider. And then you'll have to pay taxes, and you'll be a small business.
What about the business plan?
Well,
Right.
there is a business component to the training as well.
Right.
Family Woodstock does. That's how they kind of round out the training. One of the sessions is and then they will work with you throughout, you know, your tenure as a provider to assist with those
Like
things as well.
support with the
Yes.
tax process.
Mhm.
or- okay.
Yes.
and that's, you know, that's where I think there would be some synergies here, because Martha, as I understand it, the only not-for-profits that the SBA loans can be used for are daycare, right?
Correct.
So, and we have, you know, we're at almost 60% of our money available on the street in loans. So, yeah, we have $1.5 million to do small business loans.
Right. So that would be a perfect kind of adjunct to this process, right? Is there's
And-
also money available from CEDC.
And I don't know if they would qualify for the Columbia Forward grants. They'd have to be a for-profit.
Yeah, generally it's a for-profit.
And we have, so,
right?
you know, we have about $20,000 left.
Can we just be super clear, generally or definitely always?
In our experience, everyone who's gone through the family child care training program is looking for a for-profit. None of them are trying
But
to register
could
as
it
not.
be nonprofit?
I think that's outside of my expertise.
Could be, but
Right.
Yeah, because I think that's actually an interesting model.
Yeah.
You know,
But we have money for for-profit, and we have extra money for.
We also have a program that we're applying for, which is a microenterprise program for the community development block grant, and that if awarded, which was good, we're in the final stage now of the application. That would provide $25,000 to a microenterprise, which is just anybody who owns or who employs less than 5 people and is a low to moderate income employer. So that's up to $25,000 of a grant that we went, you know, into.
Right.
use.
Yeah, and-
So you've had some success, so
Yeah.
is that enough, or does it need to grow, or what do you?
I think it has to grow, right? And that's part of the reason why I was so excited to come, because it's been difficult to kind of brainstorm because the scope of our service is so narrow, right? We haven't been able to figure out how first to engage the people that need to start a business like this, and then also how to identify those in-home, the unregistered in-home childcare providers, and how to grow the program in a way that is making a greater impact. That's been at the end of the day, that's the roadblock. We have the model's ready and it's working. It's
And
just
there's another session starting at the end of September. So we've tried some different marketing strategies. And Chris and I went and hung up flyers in laundromat. I mean, we actually got a call the day after. So we're trying to go into the community and talk to people about it. But expanding that kind of outreach, because the students for this program are not our traditional college students. They see something from the college and it just, why look at it? This isn't for me. And then there's the very small percentage of people that are interested that are not eligible for the services that the workforce office provides too, because there are, eligibility requirements.
And that's where perhaps we can, with the Columbia Forward program that we have in partnership with the Chamber, because we also have money for technical assistance to do the business plan, but we wouldn't want to duplicate the curriculum. If you have one that we can, and maybe we could even retain you to do some of that work so
And
that.
Family of Woodstock does the training and they're doing it on site at their location. We thought that was more accessible as it was in the center of Hudson and people could get there.
But if we had someone who didn't qualify for the services that your office provides, help me out here, Mark, and they wanted to do this, and we were willing to give them technical assistance, we don't have to use our traditional technical assistance. We could give the money to Family of Woodstock to do it.
We could.
We could hire them.
And the cost of the training and all the paperwork at the end of the day is only $1,300 per person, right?
So what we would probably do is give them $1,000 grant and they'd have to pay $300, so they have some money in the skin in the game.
Right, yeah.
And not take the money and go through half the program and bail out.
Right, and that's happened to us too, right? So we've had 5 successful completions and like 7 people start, right? So it's not, it's not 100%, but the performance is pretty good.
Do you follow up with the ones who don't stay?
Yeah, WIOA requires follow-up. So if they're receiving services from our office and they don't complete, then we follow up for a year after to try to either get them back in or get them into another service or find a place.
Or you find out why they did.
Right. And none of them are, often, I think not even often, exclusively, they've just dodged us. I think after they feel, they took the money and ran and they probably don't, it's a little embarrassing.
But
There's some stigma.
I think the real issue is you couldn't overmarket it because you couldn't absorb the ramp up.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's the other problem. Yeah, exactly. Like the workforce funds are limited. So if I budgeted for 14 for this program year, which runs from July to June of next year. So we thought that was a safe number based on history and our ability to market the program. But it's a program that I think would be easy to find grant funding for. It's really a working, it's been piloted. We know it works. We know it's successful. So if we do expand beyond our means at this point, Families of Woodstock is able to absorb as many people as we can send them. That's the business they're in. So
I think that the first thing that we found was there's a band of people who think they want to do it until they learn what's involved. And if we could get a cheat sheet that showed them what they, a 3-page or, outline, and you may have that type of a curriculum that.
I have actually a whole a 1-pager about what the sessions are. And there is an information session
Where they can
before the
bail them
program
out
starts that
before
they have to attend so that they kind of go over this will be your
I
responsibility.
don't know, they still have it. There used to be something called Entrepreneur Inc. and they had 3 reminders, how to start any business. and it was a 50-page manual. But, I do think that when you look at the fact that 70+% of the businesses in the county have less than 10 employees, there is an entrepreneurial spirit here.
Yeah, and the people that have engaged are successful, right? The people that have engaged and completed have kids in their home. So we think that exactly the entrepreneurial spirit's there for the people, and many of them were doing this anyway, right? They were just unregistered and working with kind of friends and family under the table. So bringing them if we get them registered and we try to explain, the opportunity to make more money is there, right?
Are they doing that? Are they taking more kids?
Yeah, generally, right? Because of the way the regulations are laid out, they can only take 8 kids. So most of them, it appears, and I haven't checked in a while, are serving like 5 kids, which is better, right? 5 kids is better than no kids. And a registered daycare that can accept subsidy is better than an unregistered one that can't. So the way that we've been pitching it to those people when we get to them is like, hey, there's an opportunity for Families of Woodstock to give you placements in your area. They have people that need childcare. They have, they have the money to pay for that childcare, so you never have to worry about non-payment or people not being able to settle up at the end of the week. The money comes either from the county or from Families of Woodstock. So that when we can reach those people, we're successful in selling them.
How do we ensure that whatever seats are created aren't just swallowed up by people who can afford to pay and perhaps pay a premium?
There's no way that I could think of that
Yeah.
we could manage
Yeah.
that.
But I mean, we found that in some other areas.
Yeah, and I think that's a real
It's how we
possibility.
market it. So
Right.
the
Well,
seats
that's
the
one of
seats
the-
are full.
That's one of the things about being a nonprofit you could ask, that it becomes a need-based.
Right. Yeah, but I think that's probably a likely scenario, just because people can afford to pay and pay a premium, right? And there's a population of people in the county that where
Yeah.
the money is not the problem, it's the
I
availability.
think the county explained to me that there were different buckets based on the age. So the younger the child, the more money was available.
Yeah. And it's all income based, so you could be competitive. You could get a competitive rate as a low income working family, leveraging the money that's available either through the state or through the county. So
There are some locations that are not eligible though, and that's also a
right,
barrier.
subsidized housing. So we marketed at the Hoppeno's in Catskill, and we had a boom of interest from the people that live there. But you can't operate a business from your home when you're in that type of a housing situation. So the places
But could they, if the planning to build these new facilities, I mean, you could have it in a separate space on the first floor.
right, yeah. So and I think
Galvin has, on the project they're building over at the Depot District, one of those buildings has 5,000 square feet of retail space, and you could put a daycare in there.
yeah, and we like I said, the programming, the training, and getting people registered is not the problem. We've I don't want to say we've solved that part of it, but we've developed a system in partnership with the College and Families of Woodstock to get that part done. The hard part is finding the people to engage in the program.
Go to the employers, maybe.
Parents or parents, or the
The
daycare
workers,
people.
the daycare people.
Okay.
I think employers could absolutely be a part of the discussion. But I just don't know how that would fit necessarily. Like if they would engage their employees. Was that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's as
That's
valuable a
great.
market as anyone, right?
Yeah,
like
that's a great idea.
and I hadn't honestly. I'll put it on.
Because I'm thinking of, I have an employee who just, she was living in Stockbridge, they came to the area, they're living with their in-laws in Stockbridge, wanted to be closer to Art and Mike, because they're both, now they've got two people who've got to go to jobs, they got one car, trying to figure it out. They land in Stuyvesant, but then they realize they have no childcare. And she did end up finding it, I'm gonna ask her how. And
Yeah,
I think it's an unregistered.
And the market of
it is,
people,
it is
you know,
probably.
and-
Yeah.
I mean, parents who left work during COVID because they had to stay home and provide childcare is another market, right? Because people are staying home because they have no other
Right.
options.
Right.
And so this also kind of expands the workforce in that way, but provides space for other people to go back to work.
How big is the problem? How many of these do we need?
Yeah, that's. what
I think as many as we can build. I think the problem, and I don't have those numbers, Families of Woodstock would be able to, Kerry Wolfville would be able to, they would. But as from what I can see, the problem is we need as many as we can put together.
Is it possible to find out for Family Woodstock what demographic they're serving?
Yeah.
Are they mostly serving people who can afford it or not?
I think primarily their customer base are low income families.
Really?
But everyone who's in need of childcare is going there. The difficulty is, as kind of Mike alluded to before, is that if people who can afford that are wealthy, they can pay the premium, right? So they can transport their families and they can get, so the low income families are in competition with families that can afford to pay as much as it costs
Do
to
they
get
file
their.
an application with the provider? And if you need help, if you need childcare, you have to fill an application. My name's Chris Nardone and I work
It
here.
depends on the provider, I
And
think.
the wait list,
right.
my assistant director sends her almost 2-year-old to one of the centers locally and she was on a wait list for over a year. before, and she signed up as soon as she knew she was having a baby. And with the issues going on, which is bigger than this conversation, they've had to close early certain days. They don't have enough staff. Their hours have been shortened because there has to be a ratio depending on the children's age, especially in a center. So even in that situation, which she finally got in, and it was ideal, on a Monday, she'll get a call, we're closed on Friday this week.
And
So-
some kid had something that,
Right.
That's gonna happen.
And we're asking
Yeah,
people to
urgent
start
care, daycare.
businesses, right? We're saying this is a business. So they're incentivized to make as much money as they can, right? It's a business for them. They're paying taxes, they're paying the overhead, they're maybe paying employees. So it's a hard argument to suggest that people should focus on low income families, right? When they could charge a premium for families that could afford it. So, and I think that goes back to the fact that we just need as many as we can put together. Because until we saturate the market with open spots, there's always going to be somebody who's willing to pay a premium, which is going to preclude low income working families, who is the market that we aimed at initially.
And the more that we have in areas that don't traditionally have these spaces, that's your neighborhood, right? That's your, you're going to be recruiting from the people down the road who have children. So I think that also helps in expanding the accessibility, because you're not competing with people who, like Chris said, can drive to the area and pay the premium. But if there's a huge market, and especially in our kind of like the outskirts of our rural areas, no one is going to drive out there to bring their kids, but the people in the neighborhood will be sending their children.
So yeah, expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's they gave me an award for it, right? So it wasn't anything super innovative, right? I think what the difference was that we recognize that we don't have the capacity to open centers, right? The county, if we're focusing on low income families, the transportation barriers and the geography of the counties just doesn't lend itself to having 3 childcare centers in the city of Hudson. And so we thought that making this kind of more disparate network and aiming for those counties where there's a real drought, I mean, it's a drought everywhere, but a real need. I think that was really the only innovation. Programs like this, I'm sure, exist everywhere. And Ulster, I met with Ulster County Workforce because they're looking to adopt this model in Ulster County now. And Tompkins County had talked to us about adopting the model there, but it's really reaching the people, and the people that we're trying to market are those same low income working families, right? We want a woman who has kids, whose husband is at work and she's at home with the kids because they can't afford childcare. Take 6 more kids, right? And now you have a second income. But that's also happens to be a market that's like inherently difficult to get to. Because
Especially from where we sit, right? Because
well, how does the old thing, how does the person who wants to do that get training and get set up?
or know that it's for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if
You
the
know?
family of Woodstock advertising included that sort of, if there was sort of a campaign that they did just about that.
yeah, and
And
that's
we're
the
working with
college's
them.
marketing department too
Yeah.
has done, is working on a push for our September cohort.
With interviews from people who've been through the program and how they've gone through it and what it's done for them.
And I think the people who are going to build the 15, so how big was the center that you were on the board of?
We had like 50.
50. Yeah, they're going to have the capitalization model that neither organization can afford to support from scratch, and they're going to be able to provide a facility that the people who want to pay more can pay more.
Right.
So
So really, it's a matter of kind of side-by-side development of both of those models, right? We need centers too, like a rural family in-house childcare system isn't going to answer all of the questions. And especially in the city of Hudson and other kind of more populous areas, a center-based model there makes tons of sense because you walk 3 blocks and you drop a kid off, right?
Wouldn't it be ideal if you had, sorry to interrupt, wouldn't it be ideal if you had, just keep thinking about schools as a resource, and as a parent, if you're dropping one kid off, wouldn't it be nice to be able to drop off, have the daycare nearby in a home or in the school
Schools will
building?
do a lot of before and after care for their
Yeah.
school age, because school age children are another,
Yeah,
that's another issue.
Right.
The daycares tend to be up
So
to
interesting
5.
you bring that up,
you know.
because at our last CEDC meeting, I think it was Michael Johnston who brought up that he had reached out to Conic Hills And because they have empty,
Well, that's what I was
classrooms,
thinking.
and it's like, no,
Really?
you can't have the space.
Michael and Dave and I spoke after the meeting, and we're going to meet with Donald Kelly, the new superintendent, when Michael gets back.
Because they did during COVID, they had a daycare.
Yeah.
For essential workers.
Yeah.
I think that there was some issues between Michael and.
Well,
Yeah.
that was
All
the vibe that I got too, Mike. So I just thought that was odd.
Well, you know, who else is space, whatever, but I'm just thinking libraries and schools and, you know, the idea that.
Yeah, they already exist, like those
They're
buildings already
already
exist and they're
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
serving the community. I can't really speak to the regulatory requirements for center-based daycare programs though. I think there's a differentiation
difference.
between regulating an in-home childcare
You
program with
almost need a
8 kids.
compliance employee.
Right, and I know that
If you have
the
50 and
right, larger childcare providers need a license, whereas the small in-home providers just need to register with the state. So there are big regulatory hurdles to come to.
But at
to
the
get over.
very least, the school network is a great place to raise awareness
Right.
of the program.
And you would think that schools, it would be easy for them to meet those requirements because they exist in that heavily regulated space anyway.
But without looking at how you take your prototype program and getting enough money to scale it up. If the marketing is successful, people will think, well, we can't deliver. So I think you've been great about scaling your marketing at a pace that you can build a program. But if we can ramp it up, and then you can, double up the marketing. At one point, we were looking at a USDA grant program where we were going to divide the county into 4 quadrants and, have an economic development training program because you couldn't go to 18 towns. And, there was a little bit of pushback that we were regionalizing the county. It's not Metro Phoenix. And, but, if we scale it up with additional funding, and I think you can't go from even under that model from what you have 8 times 5. If you have 40 people in the program now, maybe you could do another 60 next year and then 80 and then, scale it up. But there's money. There's money to do it.
And we've tried to make the program itself as accessible as possible because people are working, because they're staying home with their kids. The majority of classes are in the evening, but looking for creative ways to expand that access to, I think, is important because, there are limitations to even get to training sometimes. So there's an online component to some of them, but some of them have to be in person. So we've just tried to be as flexible as possible with those issues.
How many hours? I just sent you the information on that. I found the community loan fund, but they put this big disclaimer in it that says this will not certify you to become this. Just gives you the background on what it's like an information.
Right.
It's 6 weeks, 3 hours a week.
The space that is just idle, it shocks me. I toured that abandoned elementary school with Christine Jones from Hudson Development because they were looking at it and said, with the college, like have a satellite campus there. No, it's
No, right
across
here.
from.
Across the street.
Yeah, I mean.
J.L. Edwards.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't think of the name of it. It's eerie because you walk in there and it's like, it's just been abandoned. There's still like paintings on the
Flags
walls.
in the stands.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought, this is incredible space that's just sitting there. And I suppose there would be difficulty finding workers, right? If they would, they'd have to do some refurbishments because I understand that it's filled with asbestos is what I was told. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but it probably is given the time frame in which it was built. But the building
Well,
is
even-
fine.
Even if it goes for apartments, it'd be a facility to put daycare.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
About 37.
there's a part of it that we saw that I think it was added on, that it, is in compliance with building codes and so forth, that could be opened right away.
Yeah,
Well-
I think the reason we're thinking about this, I mean, for me, the idea of alternative spaces that are in the community is that, only so many people want to actually bring a bunch of kids into their home. And there may be a lot of reasons that you can't bring your kid into home, but you really want to do this. And it seems like to remove as many obstacles as possible, So are there people who want to do this, but need is phased? And then I'm thinking it also is a great way to overlap with community and get support. And again, I always think nonprofit because sometimes I can't do that. But if it's a nonprofit and you're working in the community with senior centers or libraries or schools, it just seems like a no-brainer.
Now, that doesn't solve the problem
No.
of reaching everybody in the county. So
Right,
it's
and
still
they-
here in Hudson.
It
but-
adds kind of another problem of workforce generally, like available bodies to
Yeah,
fill those
right.
positions. Existing centers are dying, right? Because they can't fill positions as it is. So
And so your model is you're filling it with a person who it needs to have it for themselves.
is
And
already there.
do you
Yeah.
find that any of them, well, you don't really probably know yet, but any of them have helpers where they bring somebody in?
Yeah, I haven't heard any of that yet. But it doesn't, there's no reason they couldn't.
Or you could have someone who spots you, even in your own home, if you have to go to a
Right.
doctor's appointment or.
Yeah, but yeah,
So you serve that constituency first, and then if there's a greater need.
yeah, there's absolutely a greater need. Like there's the need for childcare is
Yeah.
universal. Like we need every
Right.
center and every home-based daycare we can find. But the home-based option eliminates the need to also develop a childcare
Right.
workforce, right? Which has been a constant struggle over the 3.5 years that I've been here.
But you need the same workforce in the home or not, and why is that an issue?
Well, because a person in the home is already generally already taking care of their own kids
It could be a
there.
secretary
Right.
in an law office, we know.
And an employee at a center is not making enough money to.
Right, so a center is gonna need the person to run the operation and then 4 or 5 employees. And it's the person to run the operation is the easy part. The 4 or 5 employees it's near
And at
impossible.
minimum wage,
Right.
probably.
And you're not dispersing the service out into the community. It's gonna be somewhere where you have to drive 5 to 7, 10 miles to.
Right, and like one of those in Germantown and one in Kinderhook and one in Valatia and one in Copiague would be, that would be
Right.
also a wonderful model to have a small center-based
Yeah.
program in the population centers.
There's some space available in Copiague.
But it's the question I ask whenever we talk about anything, where are you gonna find the people to work there? And I think the pay rate for childcare helpers, right, has not kept pace
Probably like
with,
CEDC.
yeah, or DSPs at the ARCs, like,
Yeah.
it just has
Is
not
there-
kept pace.
The legal requirement for how many kids per.
Yep, so
Yeah, there's a
family,
ratio.
in-home family care can have up to 8, yeah,
One per, with one.
with
caregiver.
one caregiver, yeah.
What's the business model? How much do they charge?
We had our 6
I
grandchildren.
would shoot myself.
I think that's a good question. It depends on, I think it depends on the provider. They can charge whatever they want. I think generally, and I'm just kind of speaking anecdotally, I have no idea. Yeah, somewhere in there, enough because there's no overhead effectively, right? You're just drawing your salary. So you could charge, 200, 280. And then if, families of Woodstock, you can make up to like $80,000 a year now and still get, money to support childcare.
And, I think the money that the county had, it did have a scale depending on age, but
Right,
it was
and-
around
yeah.
280.
Yeah, so you're making 280 a week for 8 kids. It's a booming business, right? It's more than I make, but you have to manage the business side of it. So maybe you're paying an
I know a
accountant.
guy that can set you up in the childcare.
Yeah.
I
don't like kids that much.
What if then you could create a business where there was a 2-person business that provided those bookkeeping and accounting services for the daycare provider?
Yeah, that would be a
For
great
several,
model,
yeah.
yeah. And then we'd have, a self-contained, a whole,
Network.
yeah, of
It could be an informal network.
Yeah.
You could have ongoing training.
and sell that
But
to the
then
people
we
that
would
are
not do that.
becoming the providers. Hey, we have a group of people that are
Right.
providing accounting services and tax preparation
Right.
and all of that. So that, I think, it might be an easier sell because that seems to be, from the business side of things, that seems to be where people get stuck. It's like, I haven't
To
worked
get a $500
in
million
years.
grant to show this hub and spoke model
Yeah.
might be something that you couldn't have done it without what you've done so far to understand the model and to.
Also, curious about the town day camps in the summer. Are those free?
They are.
Okay.
Not, well, I guess it depends on where. I know in Green County, Catskills, a 7-week program is $50,
Yeah.
but it's from 9 to 12, and that's it, Monday through Thursday.
Most of them charge, I think.
Well,
I think
It's
if you're-
limited, it's smaller than a
And they're not all
daycare,
day.
and they're not all day, and it's school-age children.
yeah, the one that we have in Claverick is free to Claverick, to Conoco students. But if you're out of the area, you have to pay, I think it's $100.
And that's, I think, similar to what Caro does, if you're out of the area.
But yeah, so I mean, that helps in the summertime, right? But like Mike and Amanda said, the kids get out at 2, right? And you have to work
Right.
until 4
Yeah.
or noon in the case of Catskill. But everything helps, right? It's better than having to stay home with your kids all summer. But so I guess long story long, the model works. Like we put together a project that has seen successes. Scaling it is a new problem, and the pace of scaling, as Mike pointed out, which is something I didn't really think about. I was just send me everybody kind of was my mantra, but you know,
think alike.
right? We'll work it out, right?
Bring them on.
But marketing, I think, is going to, and marketing not in the traditional sense of Facebook posts and newspaper ads, but finding kind of a boots on a grassroots
Yeah.
marketing system to reach the people in a place that they feel is reliable, right? Finding those trusted messengers to bring people, maybe churches would be a good place to start. And finding a way to get people who are oftentimes distrustful, right, of agencies like ours, right?
So how do you deal with the person that wants to do this, but doesn't run an organized house?
Yeah, so so we're able to
That's why I
provide
think about
some.
other spaces.
There's
Right.
cartons on every
Yeah.
counter. There's,
So we've offered to help with that to the extent that we can. But at the end of the day, we are not looking, like we're not
You're not
inspecting
running
the
them, you're
home,
just,
right? So,
That should be up to the person looking for the care.
right,
Right.
so, and I think that's
Family
been,
of Woodstock assists with some of
That kind of
that and
yeah.
and
You bring
tools and
your kid there and
techniques
you see
to
a house
get
that-
there.
Then I
Yeah.
assume you
Right.
screen.
I'm just thinking
Oh,
of
yes.
having 5 grandchildren in the house for a week, and there were toys everywhere. We didn't manage it every night, put everything away like you would in
yeah,
a business.
but yeah, so that's really doesn't have anything,
But you're not, that's why the hub and spoke model might not work, because you'd be taking on liability.
yeah, potentially, but
But
this.
you get insurance.
Right, and building entrepreneurs kind of alleviates at least us of any of that liability, right?
There
They're getting the
there are
training.
inspections when you're registered as well, so that it's not all the time.
And they have to get insurance.
Yeah.
No?
No?
No.
Oh,
Wow.
nice.
According to Family Woodstock.
Yeah.
But one of the issues we run into as well, and Chris, I'm curious, the people that actually went to the program and opened up an in-home daycare, did they own their own home?
That's a good question.
question.
I think, I'd have to look. I honestly don't know that off the top of
And
my
does it
head.
have to be a home, even if they rent it, or can it be an apartment? You
I
mentioned-
think it
Well, that's what I
depends
think.
on the,
That this landlord. that-
so subsidized housing, you can't run a business from there. But if you're renting, I think if the landlord was okay with it, I don't think that would be a problem. But again, those are questions that I have never had to
That would
ask.
be a good thing for us to know in case, in case that comes up, and I don't know how we can find out, but,
Because it's probably in the regulation. We could.
yeah.
This is exciting.
So you were talking about marketing, so you created marketing, churches, leaflets, employers,
Yeah, we could.
schools.
Yeah, yeah.
This is good.
Very good.
Healthcare, people, your,
I asked Jessica.
well, I'm thinking,
Doctor's office.
yeah, I'm thinking of where people have to go. You have to
Right.
eventually go to
That's
your
why we
doctor.
were at the laundromat, right?
Yeah,
Places
great.
where.
I mean, there's not that many doctors anymore, actually.
No.
The Kelly's
Post
famous.
office,
You could probably
where
post
they
it,
get-
right.
Yeah. Kind of those community
Libraries.
spaces, supermarkets, we kind of did the Hudson Catskill care, both
I
county
just wanted to remind you that
drop
that's,
off.
we have to deal with her.
Urgent care centers,
Yeah, thanks.
everybody as a kid gets done.
We-
Many times a year. Okay,
Stores
we have some
that have bulletin
Yeah.
boards. What do we
This is
do for
good
them?
news. This is awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. I think support, reaching people is what we need the
What
most.
can
Like,
we do?
Yeah.
that's what I
that's
heard.
it.
Yeah.
If you
Spread
can,
the word.
but
Spread the word.
if you can, what you go back and think at what your program 201 is, where can we fit in with loans? Where can we fit in with paying for some technical assistance? Martha, anything?
Right, if we looks up at any of the trainings where we can give you information on the programs and things that you.
How much should we apply for the grant from the state?
300, so it would be $260,000 we'll have to grant out, which would
And
be
what's the
up
max?
to
$25,000.
$25,000 grant.
Per business.
I also think that some people believe that the obstacles are so high. I've heard people say you have to have a second entrance in your home, you have to do things that aren't in fact required.
Right, and that's been our experience, is that the regulation, the bar is actually quite low for an 8-person in-home childcare center. There are very few real regulations. When you move up to more kids or other populations and you need a license, I think it becomes a little bit different. But as long as they stay in that 8-child registered tier, we haven't had any questions come back with landlords, and maybe they're just doing it without telling their landlord. That's entirely possible too, right? I honestly don't know. But it's also sort of none of my business, right?
Well, it's good for us to know that.
Right, but that's a good question I hadn't even thought
Unless
of.
my AI chat bot. See how good it is.
It's not as good as it used to be. It got really bad with the new update, ChatGPT. Yeah, it's not quite as smart as it was, but.
Well, thank you for coming in. And-
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
And I think, as we've talked about, Chris, on all of the workforce education components, from the K through graduation from college, our board wants us to be support partner and supportive, not lead. So to the extent that we'll take our direction from you, and we didn't want to get it out ahead of random people who are calling us, and now we can tie you in when.
Yeah, and refer people. If somebody says I'm interested in opening an in-home
Have you
childcare
met
program.
with? I know. Have you met with Bob Gibson? Bob
No, I mean, I have, but not on this, no.
Yeah, maybe we should put that meeting together so you can direct, because Jennifer Depew runs the office that gives out the money, and then you can direct someone directly to her. And then
Well, and I think that as a looking forward,
Yeah.
more access and more support for participants who might not be fully eligible for whatever reason, maybe they have a degree in something else, but then life circumstances change, just having people know that it's not all on them to go through this on their own,
Right.
because it is overwhelming. It's about 37 hours of training, even, but that they're accessible trainings and there's financial support, and
Right.
you don't have to basically abandon your life and
so you
not
can-
work for,
There's-
these months.
There's a resource. And someone to help you do the grant, not somebody.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
There are two people, I feel like that, two entities that can mail information legally to, or do regularly do so legally, which is schools, because you're mailing to property owners. And can't the town, can you go through the towns?
Most of the towns,
To market?
but that's where I thought Columbia Forward would
Right.
be a
So we
good
could do
role,
that.
because most of the town supervisors at least have a list of people that have
Right.
requested to be notified about
Well,
activities. in the
even to
town.
have something on every town's website, like, oh,
Yeah.
there's this great program. Because
A little box that
what
says-
new homeowner is it, what percentage of new homeowners are looking for? Not to mention, might be employers who have people.
And I think that,
Employers is the other one.
Chris is engaged the chamber, and they're going to include us because of the Columbia Forward program on some training from your other grant.
Yeah, so,
But I think that to be able to get that out through Columbia Forward and through the chamber can work out. And then we also can get, we have really good list from PPP 1 and 2
Oh, right,
of the
right.
top businesses in the county, because
Right.
nobody didn't take it.
Yeah,
And, most of them are still in business. The smaller ones, the pizza parlor may have gone out of business and the like, but, when you look at the top employers, and they may be willing to subsidize.
What does the hospital do?
I was gonna just say that.
the hospital hasn't done anything yet, right? But we're still, we're through year 1 of a pilot, right? So we
That's
haven't
gonna
really
be
been
huge.
pushing out too hard, but the hospital does, I don't know that they offer any, there's no like on-campus childcare options.
Yeah.
There isn't, and I think, quite honestly,
Yeah.
the hospital is, it's gone through a leadership change this year.
Yeah.
Dorothy Urschel is absolutely phenomenal, but the hospital's having issues. Just
Yeah.
with staffing.
They got 8 million yesterday.
Yeah, they got 8 million, which is great.
That softens
But I
it a little bit.
But I think down the
It's already
road,
spent, I'm sure.
I think as we move forward, maybe the timing isn't right
Right,
at this
yeah.
moment, but I think that the hospital would get on board with it.
Yeah.
They
As
just
the
built
right
their
to-
staff.
major
and then
employer.
they have that.
They may help us, when we go to the next stage, they could afford to
And
support
frankly,
the center.
if the hospital knew of the possibility, and they've got people hopefully applying for jobs soon, or like, I can't live in that county.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we need to
Absolutely.
recruit. So it is, I just,
Time to,
I'm not the chair, by the way, of this committee, but it is, it is not.
you're sitting in the chair today.
Are you the chair? Who's the damn chair?
It's not a committee, it's a workforce.
Yeah, right,
It's a
yeah, it's not a
workforce.
committee, but I would note that it is.
Yeah.
You guys,
Great,
that's
thank you.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're happy to come back anytime. We've got a lot of stuff kind of cooking out there. So if you run into a topic where you could use some training, or use some knowledge about the training we're working on, right? We're developing an LPM program. We're working with Jim Church to do some K-12 stuff, some workforce readiness and professionalism stuff. So
But
yeah.
to the extent that it involves integrating businesses, let us know, and Bill and we work together very closely, and we can.
We're trying to be really conscious of starting our programming with that in mind, right? Because we understand that resources in that county are very spread out, but if we all have the same end goal. So if we can just start the development in collaboration, it makes sense. So.
So is the next step, do you think, I can work directly with you guys to pull in the towns to get their distribution list?
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
that
Yeah.
you can develop the information and we'll sort of be the
Yeah.
intermediary
Yeah.
with the towns.
And I mean,
get
within the
those
next
lists
2
and then
days, we'll
whatever.
have on the website a mini page for this program that we can
Fabulous.
direct people to.
And maybe we can work at
flyers.
a flyer, we've been marketing, taking money and saying we have a manufacturer's loan program. And we've got 2 or 3 people, but we could say we have a loan program and give an outline, work with you to develop what that might be.
Yeah, that would be perfect. It's really, that's the need right now. Like the money's there. We funded it for 14. So if we get more than 14, that'll be a blessing, right?
Yeah.
So, but for now, it's really reaching people. So I think that's the best place for us to start.
Thank you.
All right,
so
thank you.
much.